Remember when they start saying nobody picked the Rams to have this kind of season, remember that all they are trying to do is to cover their butts. I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView.
It's hot out there, but let's blow them off the line of scrimmage. Headline, Los Angeles.
Live from the Ram Cave, I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView, the January 8th, 2024 edition, brought to you by Kistler Law Firm. Injured in an auto accident, need help, got questions, call Kistler Law at 661-206-6990. That's Kistler Law at 661-206-6990. And check out KistlerLawFirm.com. KistlerLawFirm.com. That's one word. Kistler Law. They've been fighting for you since '92. And by Temple City Auto Repair. Having some auto issues? Get yourself some John and Henry at TempleCityAutoRepair.com. And of course, by Granite Ridge Christian Camp, a place where your life can change. Yes, the Rams had a season that nobody, except a lot of people like you and a lot of people like me, knew. And again, don't let anyone dissuade you from what you see or what you believe. Anyway, how is all this possible? The name that's not getting mentioned in this whole amazing run the Rams have had, the name that's not getting mentioned is Stan Kroenke, right? Think back as a Rams fan, there's very little in terms of ownership that you could cheer about, right? We're not going to mention She Who Must Not Be Named. And if you go back to the 60s, you got Dan Reeves, who did all this stuff with George Allen. And George Allen, I understand, is a pain in the neck, but Dan Reeves was an impulsive, crazy owner too. And then you had Carroll Rosenblum, who even he meddled a little bit. Stan Kroenke is the owner that Ram fans have been waiting for our whole lives, right? He empowers the McSneed administration to do the stuff they need to do to make sure this team wins. He builds a stadium, right? He spends his own dough. He spends the dough to make this team competitive. We'll take the hits that they take with the dead cap, and you never hear from him. You know, once in a while he gives me a call, right? But you never hear from him. And if he could only provide a better playing surface at SoFi, to me, he'd be in the Hall of Fame already. But Stan Kroenke, right? I'm watching this, and I'm trying to chip away and think about, it's not much of a Ram game to talk about, and that's good news because there was no serious injuries. Starters played limited snaps. I still have my Nakua issues about playing for a record. But what gets us to this point where, you know, they're going to their fifth playoff berth in 7 seasons, 5 playoff berths in 7 seasons, after going from 2005 all the way to 2016 without a playoff berth, right? And so this is pretty amazing stuff, and it comes down to Stan Kroenke. And so thank goodness for Stan Kroenke. Number 2, the other thing was, I brought this up last week, and I think I posted it somewhere else, is again, the McVay effect. We didn't know what Wentz was going to do, but Wentz did it yesterday, right? And it goes back to, again, the McVay effect, right? The world is done with Baker Mayfield. He picks him up, dusts him off, gets a big win out of him, and now Mayfield, after moving to Tampa, is a division champ. Now, you could call the NFC South dog meat. Yes, it's dog meat. But out of all that dog meat, it's the guy that was a quarterback for the Rams that just looked great in his short time with the Rams. And so, yeah, that's the McVay effect. McVay on a smaller level picks up Demarcus Robinson. That's a McSneed thing, okay. Picks up Demarcus Robinson, and not even Andy Reid thought Demarcus Robinson was worth holding on to. Bounces to Baltimore, and even John Harbaugh, you know, they're talking about how Lamar Jackson has no weapons. You know, Demarcus Robinson was there, and yet they bring him in, and it seems like at just the right time, mid-season, he comes in and does a great job. And then, of course, the McSneed admin picks up Carson Wentz. A few weeks too late for some Ram fans, right? a few weeks too late. But Wentz comes in and secures the 6th seed, and it's a 10-win season. Just amazing stuff. And I shared this. The Rams might be the Raiders of the 70s and 80s, or the early 80s, right? Guys that were bouncing around everywhere. Matuzak, even a Hall of Famer like Ted Hendricks, burned out in Baltimore, spent 1 season in Green Bay, but they brought him in and he became a Raider for life. Guys that never went to college, guys like Otis Sistrunk, guys like Jim Plunkett, guys like Lyle Alzado, and even a guy like Rod Martin that they found in the 12th round in the 1977 draft that ended up having an couple all-pro years, couple Pro Bowl years, and, of course, the 3-interception game in Super Bowl 15. This is the amazing thing about the Rams, and it truly feels like a golden age. Okay, let me take a drink here because I'm going to yak or cough. 55 seconds were left in the game yesterday when I got into it. Rams were up 21-20, and I was watching the game. I was as chill as could be. I accepted Dallas. I'll go to Dallas. I wanted to go to Dallas more than I wanted to go to Detroit. And then after a while, you're watching this game, and it's like, let's just get this win. Let's get to win number 10, and let's get it in Frisco and stuff. I don't care anything about the streak. I really don't care. Whatever. Okay, we beat them in the NFC title game. You know, it'd be nice to beat them during the regular season. It's not some monkey that's off our back now. But either way, you start getting into it because you're a fan and you're competitive even as a fan. And there's 55 seconds left, and then the Rams wrapped it up. But I remember just making the note saying, now I'm into it. And then Mr. Irrelevant, Deshaun Johnson gets the sack. Sam Darnold coughs up the ball. Byron Young recovers it, and the Rams secure the victory. Really great to see. Here's some, non-big deal points that I noticed. I wanted to see who started the game. Laurel Murchison, Bobby Brown, Jonah Williams, Young and Hoyt were at the edge. Reeder was in the middle linebacker spot. Very glad they didn't play Ernest Jones, let alone Aaron Donald. Kobe Durant came in, and Kobe Turner played 37 snaps, and he looked good. And he's a special player now, right? Witherspoon, Kobe Durant, they played a full game. And then you had Jordan Fuller until he went out, and then Russ Yeast. And then you had Johnny Johnson and Quentin Lake. And those are the guys that started on the offensive line. They were about the only guys, and I'll break down their snaps in a minute. But they did a good job. I was really glad that some of these guys didn't play, which really leads me to I don't care about the record. I don't care about Nakua having a moment with his mom. I just don't. I thought they risked too much. And you could see Sean McVay, they show the highlight after Nakua breaks the record. He's going, get him out of there. And I don't know. I'm not saying McVay gave in to pressure, but McVay didn't want him out there. You could tell he didn't want him out there. And I don't know. He didn't gave in to pressure. And again, I don't care. I don't want to be as stupid as the 49ers are, running a jet sweep to Deebo Samuel, running Deebo Samuel across the middle. Yeah, he made some catches, did his thing. I don't know, man. All I'd want to do is the longer I saw Deebo Samuel out there, I'm thinking, where's Nick Scott? Somebody put a Nick Scott hit on this guy when he should even be playing. And so, yeah, I wasn't thrilled. I mean, Nakua's great. I'm happy he got the record, but it doesn't mean I'm happy he played. Sorry. Watching Carson Wentz, though, it was a different dimension, though, him running the ball. It's called quarterback runs, right? We haven't had that ever, really, in Ram history. And I kind of loved it because, one, Wentz is a capable passer, right? He doesn't throw at the level of Sean McVay, but not Sean McVay, of Matthew Stafford, but he made some throws yesterday. The one to Skoranek down the middle, the one to Hopkins along the sideline. He made some throws. But then you add this ability to run the ball. And I kind of like it that if something, unfortunately, please Lord no, happens to Matthew Stafford, Wentz can come in and he's the perfect change of pace because now the defense will have to adjust their game plan to a quarterback who could tuck the ball and run. I'm not saying comparing them as players. It's the Vince Evans effect, right? Vince Evans was great as a guy that would come in to replace a starter or somebody that was hurt during the course of a game, and he would shake things up, man. He had a strong arm, And he could run the ball. Even into his like pushing 40, he was still running the ball. Wentz can run the ball, and it changes things up. Maybe Wentz isn't a starting quarterback in the NFL. Vince Evans really was a marginal starter in the NFL. Better is what he was with those Raiders for all those years. But I really enjoyed watching Wentz and the idea that, yeah, you know, he's a new piece, right, to the puzzle that you can put in or to the board, a new piece you could add to the board to maybe change things up a little bit. And it's not doom and gloom, right? It's not John Wolford coming into a game, you know, if something bad happens. I love the catch I mentioned Bryce Hopkins made along the sideline. I'll be honest, Bryce Hopkins has always looked more like a really big wide receiver to me than a tight end. And I'm sure there are reasons, right? I'm sure there are reasons he hasn't seen the field. I'm sure there are reasons that Davis Allen has passed him on the depth chart. I'm sure there's all kinds of reasons. But I'll always remember his performance in Super Bowl 56, his 4 catches, and his great seal block on the 4th down jet sweep on the final drive for Cooper Kupp to get that first down. And so I always have a soft spot for Bryson Hopkins. Maybe if he played more, I would see him fail more, and then I wouldn't have such warm fuzzies for him. But I can't imagine him coming back, and I was happy to see him get a little PT, and maybe he gets a contract next year someplace else. Enjoyed watching Ronnie Rivers run the ball, very confident there, really nice. Enjoy Royce Freeman. My only thing about Royce Freeman is I don't know why you're giving him a pitch out and asking him to run wide, but that's neither here nor there. Brett Maher barely makes one PAT, and then he misses the other one, right? Wow, right? Let's just be one of those aerial offenses that just never kicks the ball and go from there, always go for 2. And you have to wonder if Frisco kicker Jake Moody caught something from Maher someplace around there. You know, quarterbacks meet, everyone talks in pre-games. You wonder if the kickers get too close to each other, and maybe some of Maher's bad mojo rubbed off on Jake Moody, the former Michigan kicker, drafted 3rd round by the 49ers this year, because he missed a chip shot field goal for him, would have been one for him this year, and then he missed an extra point. And you got to love the unease that Moody's performance is likely causing in Frisco land today. I love it. I love to see Frisco get nervous. That's one of my favorite things, because this is it for them. This is their window. Again, they played Deebo Samuel. They played Trent Williams. They played Brandon Ayuk. And then again, running Deebo. Deebo and Ayuk and Williams shouldn't even have seen the field. I don't care if I have to put a fullback at left tackle for a game I don't need to win. I'm not putting out the best left tackle in football, Trent Williams, a surefire Hall of Famer who's had a couple of nicks and aches this year. I'm not putting him on the field. I don't understand sometimes the 49ers. I just don't. It's a lot different, the Rams playing Alaric Jackson the whole game than Trent Williams. Everything is sewed up for the 49ers. He didn't need to be out there. Again, the Wentz's throws and the nice catches. Tyler Johnson, huh? Wow, right? That's a lot of depth on the practice squad when your practice squad guy can come in and make catches like Tyler Johnson made. Nice catch, great throw on the touchdown. Great throw to Nakua on the touchdown. It was a great throw. Great throw to Davis Allen on that 4th down. And of course, I thought it was a great throw to Tutu Atwell on the 2-point conversion. He's moving, he throws it, leads him. It was a really nice job. Michael Hoyt picked up his 6th sack, and Byron Young picked up number 8. So good for those guys. Again, it's a 21-20 game. It's a preseason game for the most part because of all the backups playing, but it was a nice win. And then I do have to say this, finally, before we get to around the NFL and other places. Do you think, just a little, that late in the game, that pass interference call, right? Tutu goes deep. I believe it was Tutu, went deep, and that pass interference call, it was PI. It was. But there was part of me thinking, nah, the NFL wants the Rams in Detroit next week. The NFL wants the Rams to win this game. And so they gave them every opportunity with the PI. I don't know. The conspiracy side of me went to work after that play. I'm watching it because that was such a critical play that people would be talking about if it was, wasn't such a non-issue type game. So something to think about. All right, around the NFL and other places, We're going to talk a lot of Lions football this week. Note to the Lions, though, can I just tell you, leave your helmet alone. I hated that design that I saw yesterday when you're playing the Vikings. What are you doing just at the moment of getting to the next level? You're jacking with your helmet. Don't jack with your helmet. You got a great helmet. You don't need to mess with it. Secure the brand. Don't worry about establishing anything new, right? I know the Fords are probably cheap people. I don't know. Maybe they're not. But you don't need to add revenue by changing a look here and there. If I was a Lion fan, I would be protesting right now, right? The recently now unemployed Arthur Smith, that was another one that kind of caught my eye. He was fired at midnight or just after midnight this morning. I loved watching him complain about the touchdown that the Saints scored, right? And this is something that probably everybody should know about me since we got a lot of new viewers, and I so appreciate you guys so much. But I'm all for running up scores. I am, right? To me, if you can't stop them, that's your problem, right? And I say this as somebody who's coached a lot of basketball teams, and my basketball teams were pretty bad. And if I felt it was an issue of lack of focus, lack of effort on my players' part, as the team that we were playing was running a full court press and just kicking our butts, I would burn all my timeouts to slow things down and make the carnage last a little longer, because it's my firm belief that, you know, most of us aren't going to play in the NFL. We're not going to play pro ball. But when we run up, the scores run up on us, it reminds us that life never stops. Life never says, I've been kicking your butt a little too much, so I'm going to take a knee here. No, we know life just keeps kicking your butt, and there's a great lesson to be learned there. And Arthur Smith, I'm sorry, be prepared for your players. You know, be prepared. You know, you don't know what they're going to do, and I'm not going to give anything up. And yeah, you could say it's not sportsmanship, it's not that, but that's the other guy's problem, right? That's the other guy's problem. If they want to run it up, let them run it up. I'm going to be ready to knock heads and stuff. And so I never got mad at anybody for running up the score on me. I liked the lesson it drilled into my players and kind of drilled into me growing up. And they'd say, Joe, do you want me to call a timeout? I'd ask the other team, use your timeout. And they'd say, no. And I said, just use it. It's okay. You're not upsetting me. I want my guys to suffer here, because they were up too late before their game. They were clowning. They didn't take the team seriously enough. It's like, run it up. I'm all for running up the score. It's just something that it's the softness of our culture. I don't care about your feelings. We got to get beyond our feelings and deal with reality. So Arthur Smith, run along, go to college, go do something else, and then maybe come back to the NFL. I'm sorry if your feelings were hurt. And I like Jameis Winston for saying, hey, Dennis Allen didn't approve it. I called it. And at least he took ownership of it. So anyway, I digress. Did you watch the Houston Texans on Saturday night? Nico Collins is playing like a number one receiver, and I don't think anyone thought of him. He's a third rounder out of Michigan. I never thought anyone ever thought Nico Collins was a number one receiver, and he definitely looks like a number one receiver. And C.J. Stroud looks like an absolute star. What a rock star C.J. Stroud is. I mean, it's not a case of, maybe him or Bryce Young. It's a case of, why wasn't it C.J. Stroud the whole time? And I'm the first one to say, as I'm very happy to claim that I was right on the Rams this year, I'm very happy to say that for the bulk of C.J. Stroud's career at Ohio State, I was absolutely wrong. I warmed up to him in the playoff game last year because I saw something in him I hadn't seen before. And I was absolutely wrong on C.J. Stroud. That guy's a star and very impressive. So moving on, joining Arthur Smith in the unemployed line is Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera is gone. He's kind of like this decade's Jeff Fisher. Sorry, Mr. Burns, I mentioned his name. I'm going to mention his name again in a second here. But I'm looking at Ron Rivera, and I think he's a good NFL coach. I think he's a solid guy. And there should be some a union, like an interim head coaches union. You know, coaches who can steady the ship and serve as an interim, you know, for half a season or 1 year, just to get things right? Ron Rivera is one of those guys. Wade Phillips is one of those guys that you don't want him for long term. You just want him to settle the waters, right? Just let's get this thing on track and let's get to 7 wins, and then we can move on from this guy. And you know what that guy is? That guy's also, forgive me for saying his name, Ram fans, Jeff Fisher. You know, Jeff Fisher came in 2007, the Rams won 3 games. In 2008, they won 2 games. 2009, they won 1 game. Spagnuolo came in, and they won 7 games, and it looked like they were ready to turn the corner, and they played that Sunday night game in Seattle, right? Just before Seattle took off in 2010. And what happened was everything, the bottom fell out the next year. I think the Rams were 2-14 or 3-13, and they fired Spagnuolo. And then they brought in Jeff Fisher. And Jeff Fisher is a competent individual. He got the team to 7 wins. First year, that was acceptable. Second year, that was acceptable. By the third year, it was all 7-9, as he would say, Bolshoi, and then you move on. But in terms of kind of bringing some stability, Rivera, Wade Phillips, Jeff Fisher, there should be a whole cadre, like a union for these coaches for when you fire your guy mid-season, like a Brandon Staley, you could just reach in and grab this guy and just plug him in and say, hey, I'm just here to steady the ship until you get someone else. Jaguars not making the playoffs just stunned me. Trevor Lawrence is not healthy. Trevor Lawrence has not looked right for 6 weeks. He didn't look good. And I like Trevor Lawrence. I like the Jaguars, but I think they pushed it too much with him. They probably should have given him a couple of weeks off instead of just one. Yeah, that one's interesting about Jacksonville. Jacksonville looked like they were ready to take the next step. Following the Jets this year, that was another thing. Following the Jets this year, it really surprised me when I took a look at their record and saw that they finished 7-10, right? They seemed so much worse, right? Granted, then the teams they beat, there was no big wins there against, powerful teams necessarily, but they just seemed so much worse, and there was so much chaos there. They were 7-10 without a quarterback. Where would this team be if they just had a quarterback? Where would they have been if they had Carson Wentz? I put this in here because my friends were letting me know they were very upset this week about the passing of Lacey Underall. If you know who I'm talking about, you know. Sorry, rest in peace, Lacey Underall. And then finally, last thing here, Chargers, Panthers, Raiders, Falcons, Texans, possibly New England, possibly Tennessee, maybe not Chicago, looking for head coaches. I think Antonio Pierce needs the job. The Raiders need Antonio Pierce in Las Vegas. He might be just a steady the ship guy, but they need that ship steadied and create, again, reharken the Raider culture because those dudes play hard for Antonio Pierce. Okay, I think we're at commercial. And yeah, I'm Joe Terosian, and I was a sports writer for 21 years. I still am, kind of. And I was one of the founding members at Mid-Valley Sports. And those guys are still in the business. They cover the Chargers at midvalleysports.com. Peterson and Dwayne, they're in the room with the Chargers. I'm blessed. I get to do this. I got sponsors from Kistler Law and Temple City Auto that allow me to talk about the Rams. I also write books. My books are available on Amazon. Please just type in Joe Terosian and look at one of my books. I have 2 high school football novels that are out there. They've been received well. They did fairly well. And they help me do this, and they keep me employed during my day job. My day job is I pastor a small church in Burbank called Burbank Faith Nazarene, and that is also found here on YouTube at Burbank Faith Virtual, as well as all across social media. And we just thank you for your support. If you could check us out on Spotify, and if you are not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button to Spotify and here on YouTube, as we've been blessed we've seen a great growth this year. And hit share the link, talk to your friends. We do a lot of talking Rams football here. I think it's what we do best. Amen. Okay, let's look at some of the questions that have come in here. All right, Mr. Burns, Matt Ariza hit 99% of his extra points. Gay, Gould, Suckup available, and we can't afford to lose by 1. I'm going Matt Gay. If that was it, if that was a choice, if you're giving me a choice, Mr. Burns, I'm going Matt Gay. I didn't know Ariza, the punter from San. I didn't know he was a double duty guy. If that was the case, yeah, I would have signed him. Mr. Burns again. Who is team MVP? Stan Kroenke. Team MVP. Nothing happens without Stafford. Nothing happens without Stafford. But I would say Aaron Donald, what did he finish with this year? 8 sacks, hardly one of his flashy seasons, but maybe one of his greatest in terms of what he was able to do along that line with his players. Yeah, I don't care. You can give it to anybody you want right now in terms of MVP. Kendrick was abused. He gave up 1 catch. One catch, Mr. Burns. Kendrick gave up one catch. Cut that dude some slack. USA expat. This entire year, I found myself watching the Rams offensive line unit. Rams goes as they go. Amen, right? Me too. One of the things I got into when I was sports writing was we were covering a lot of high school football. And of course, you cover all the kids who score the touchdowns, make the big plays and everything. But one of the things we started doing when I was at Mid-Valley, at the Mid, is I would make our writers write down the starting offensive line for both teams, left tackle, right tackle, center, guard, and so on, because you wanted to give those big uglies, some press, because everything begins with them. You're so right, X-Pac. And here's the other thing. Teams talk about how bad their offensive line. They've been trying to talk about how bad C.J. Stroud's offensive line was earlier this year. The Rams' offensive line last year, because of the injuries, was the worst offensive line probably in history. When you're bringing in Matt Skura, Jeremiah Colon, you're literally hiring guys from Home Depot and the police academy to fill out your roster. That offensive line is so bad. It's not comparable. A lot of teams that struggle with their offensive line are playing backups. Rams were playing backups to the backups to the backups, guys that weren't even practice squad people. And you always need to keep an eye on that offensive line. And it was fun to watch that little pivot from the outside zone, right, the run to the more gap scheme in the running game. And that was kind of fun to watch that take place and that adaptation or evolving of the Rams offensive line this year. Yeah, I watched the offensive line all the time. Steeler fan Rob in Missouri, Jaguars should have never disrespected the terrible towel. Karma. I guess they did. Steeler fan Rob. Happy for you. You're going to Buffalo. That's a winnable game. But Josh Allen's a dangerous quarterback. And I'd rather have played Miami because I think the guys would have beat Miami. I think it's a little more up in the air against Buffalo. All right, we answered that, and we're going to go back and we'll answer some questions at the end. Just doing some business here. Rams update. They waived Ernest Brown the 4th today. He gets waived on his birthday. Rams took him a couple of years ago. He was nothing more than out of Northwestern. Just a marginal, was he an edge guy? Was he a DI? Was he an interior defensive lineman? No one really knew. Couldn't figure it out. They waived him. Today's his birthday. He's 25. Today's Ochawan Brown's birthday. He's 25 too. But Brown's Ochawan Mathis. I'm sorry. Ochawan Mathis is a rookie, and Ernest Brown is in his third year. And so they let him go. It makes you wonder what they're thinking. If why waive him now? What's going on? Did somebody's getting activated or something? I need to follow up on that. Yesterday during the game, snaps weren't an issue, except it was good to see Russ Yeast get extended playing time after Jordan Fuller got banged up a little bit. Kobe Durant as well, and DeJuan Johnson, right? Mr. Irrelevant, 29 snaps and a sack. That was good work for him. On offense, Steve Avila and Alaric Jackson went the distance. Now, you could say, well, Joe, why are you making a big deal about Trent Williams? Well, Trent Williams is a transcendent all-time left tackle that's going directly to the Hall of Fame. And there was nothing for the 49ers to play for. They were getting another week off, and they've got home field all sewn up. Where if you want to find out what you have in Carson Wentz, you probably needed to leave a couple of those starters in there. Now, they did go the distance. I think they went 67 snaps, Alaric Jackson and Steve Avila. But you wanted to see what Wentz had. You wanted to give Wentz a fighting chance. Shelton and Havenstein each went 41 snaps before McClendon and Ankrum replaced them, as well as Ankrum came in earlier for Kevin Dotson, but Brian Allen came in at center for Shelton. Isn't that amazing how Brian Allen has become an afterthought after that amazing year he had in 2021? Tells you how good Coleman Shelton has been. Davis Allen got the bulk of the snaps at tight end, and he looked good. 50 snaps, he looked good. And then, Bryson Hopkins had 18. So that part leaves the Rams healthy going forward. Now, something to think about, and this isn't the history section or the on this date section, but this is just this little interesting thing that's playing out. When you look at these teams right now, which team is mortal, which team could surprise, right? Browns Texans. I think that game could go either way. Browns defense can surprise a lot of people. Chiefs Dolphins in cold weather. I'm going Chiefs. Steelers Bills is interesting, right? The Bills secondary isn't great. Mason Rudolph's been hot. I actually think there'll be better receivers for the Steelers this week than the Dolphins last week or this last night. So that game could be interesting. Packers, Cowboys. Cowboys to me seem very mortal. That's why I wasn't afraid about playing them. Rams, Lions, we're going to get to that. And then, of course, Eagles, Buccaneers. And Buccaneers, yeah, they could beat the Eagles. The Eagles look terrible right now. But this is the interesting part. The Rams are playing the Lions. They've only met once in the playoffs. On December 21st, 1952, the NFL had a divisional playoff game where the Rams went to Detroit. They played in what was called Briggs Stadium, which became Tiger Stadium in front of 47,000 fans. And the Lions beat the Rams 31-21. Rams fell behind 14-0. Van Brocklin hit Tom Fears in the second quarter to make it 14-7. But by the end of the third, the Lions were in full control, 24-7. In the fourth, Deacon Dan Towler scored on a 5-yard run. Vitamin Smith had a 56-yard punt return, and the Rams made it 24-21. But the Lions ended up closing it out for a 31-21 victory with a late TD. Rams fumbled twice, threw a pick. Lions' Bobby Lane threw 4 interceptions. Elroy Hirsch even had one of those interceptions. And here's the interesting part. The Lions won this game to advance to the league championship. And it was interesting. They beat the Cleveland Browns 17-7. Now, that's really fascinating because the Browns and Lions played in the NFL championship game the year the Rams played the Lions in the playoffs, 1952. Neither the Lions nor the Browns have been to the Super Bowl. And when you look at this, I think the Browns have a better shot than the Lions. But when you look at this, the Browns are a team that could surprise some people. And I think every team in the AFC is vulnerable, including the Ravens, because the Browns are so familiar with them. And so all those guys set, all those Browns players pretty much set on Sunday. So chance to get healthy, heal up, get focused for the postseason. And isn't that just ironic that in the year the Rams played the Lions in the playoffs, the only time, 1952, turned out to be the only time, and the two teams that haven't gone to the Super Bowl, the Lions and the Browns, played in the NFL championship game. How's that for some homework, right? Is that pretty cool? I thought that was pretty cool. All right. We know the Saturday night game, Browns, Texans. We'll get into predictions later on. Dolphins, Chiefs, that's on Peacock exclusively. That means it's not going to be shown on NBC. You got to get Peacock. Fortunately, I do have my access to Peacock, so I'll watch it. I guess it's going to be a cold, snow, wet game, so that should be kind of cool to watch. Packers, Cowboys. I would not sell the Packers short. They're young. They don't know what they're not supposed to know, and the Cowboys have all the pressure, right? Cowboys are terrified. And how marvelous would it be, right? How marvelous would it be if the Packers beat the Cowboys? Just to see the meltdown, right? Just to see Skip Bayless go apoplectic, right? Just to see every Cowboy fan just melt away into bitterness, right? How marvelous, right? And I was thinking about this, and I'll take correction on this. Usually Steve Ramirez, sports writer out there, is really good at this. But you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't do my homework. This just hit me. If the Packers beat the Cowboys and the Rams beat the Lions, right? The team that's the lowest seed would probably have to play the 49ers, which means the Packers would go to Levi and the Rams would go to Tampa Bay, right? That's pretty interesting. Rams have had a lot of experience with the Buccaneers recently in the postseason. And just on the regular season, they've had a lot of experience with the Buccaneers. That would be interesting. And then it would be interesting if the Rams are favored and they beat the Buccaneers, and the 49ers are favored and they beat the Packers, that could we see an NFC championship game in Levi, and the fear that would come over the over the 49ers. I'm just throwing it out there as a hypothetical. It all depends on the Packers beating the Cowboys and the Rams beating the Lions, but just something to think about. Just something to think about. Okay, closing out last week of the season, I was 13-3, really happy on the year. My picks, I just picked winners and losers, folks. I was 180-92. I don't know what that would have gotten me in Vegas, but that's okay. I'm not worried about that. Steelers beat the Ravens. No surprise there. Texans, Colts. It did surprise me. Jonathan Taylor wasn't on the field on the 4th and 1, right? That part did surprise me. The call was great. It wasn't a great throw. The kid should have caught it for the Colts, and that's life, right? That's what happens. Buccaneers, Panthers. Buccaneers just find a way to win ugly. And I think if they can just get a little healthy, and I don't know if Mayfield's healthy, they can beat the Eagles. The Eagles are an inferno right now. Bengals, Browns. Congratulations to the Bengals getting their 9th win. Lions, Vikings. Lions won that game. Some players got banged up. We're going to look at the injury report. We'll see it when we're back on Wednesday. Patriots surprised me. I really thought they beat the Jets, kind of a farewell, but they lost to the Jets 17-3. And man, the Patriots look really bad. And if I'm in the fan base, thank you, Bill Belichick, but you got to go. And I don't know what any team is thinking about if they want to hire Bill Belichick as their head coach, unless maybe it's the guy in Carolina, right? I don't get it. Falcons, Saints. Had no problem with the Saints scoring the late touchdown. If you don't like it, Arthur Smith, do something about it, but now you can't. You're unemployed. Jaguars, Titans, talked about Trevor Lawrence, didn't look good. Seahawks, Cardinals. I was happy the Seahawks got this win. Pete Carroll goes 9-8. I don't hate the Seahawks like I do the 49ers or some of the other teams. It's the USC connection with Pete Carroll. But a disappointing season for them. They got 1 year left on Geno's contract, so I think they got to go after a quarterback. And because that team's too good, too talented, and they need something more in terms of someone who's pulling the trigger for that offense. And let's hope as Ram fans they don't find them. Bears, Packers. Packers won the game. They needed to win that game. Jordan Love's done well. But Bears fans, do me a favor. Don't take Caleb Williams, right? Don't. Then that way you stay the Bears, right? I don't know why you'd want to hang on to Justin Fields. Restart, the clock. You're going to have to pay him a contract. You have to give him more money. Give that money to Caleb Williams. Chiefs, Chargers. The Mid-Valley guys were at that game yesterday, and one of them texted me, and I won't say the name, but one of them texted and said there was zero energy in that stadium. You know why there was zero energy? And it wasn't because Patrick Mahomes wasn't playing. There's zero energy is because the Chargers do not belong in Los Angeles. They don't. They do not belong in Los Angeles. Send them back to San Diego or send them someplace that needs an NFL franchise. Who's next on the list? I know. Send them to St. Louis, right? I don't want to upset our St. Louis fans watching us, but somebody needs a new franchise, and the Chargers just are not an LA team. Broncos, Raiders. Raiders won. Congratulations to the Raiders and Antonio Pierce. Went 5-4 with that team. They figured to be better. Giants, Eagles. I picked the Eagles, and I was surprised the Giants beat them, but a lot of people were saying the Giants were. They like Tyrod Taylor, and the Eagles are absolutely imploding. Cowboys, Taxskins. Living in the fairyland of love, the Cowboys are. But you know what? When they play a tough team, I'll let you know, or they'll let us know by losing because they've had an easy schedule. Bills, Dolphins. And I think we all saw it. I don't dislike Tua. I was absolutely wrong. I didn't think he'd survive the season. But Josh Allen is something special. Josh Allen is off the charts, right? And you can get on him for the picks or whatever. Now, the pick he threw that was deep in the end zone, the one where Gabe Davis tripped, I call that nothing more than a glorified punt on 4th down. But everyone's going to get uptight about it. The pick he threw where Gabe Davis broke right, he threw back left. I don't know. That's between receiver and quarterback, and that happened in the Philly game with the Bills this year. But Josh Allen's a winner. And if there's a team that's easy to root for in the AFC, it's the Bills. If the Rams get bounced, the Bills would be easy to root for. Okay, on this day in Rams history, as we get set to wind this show down, and we're going to go and
it was a stone groove.
The show's a stone groove, but it's not a stone groove yet because we're not done. On this date, January 8th, 1968, the Rams acquired a defensive back named Ron Smith from the Falcons. Most of you won't remember Ron Smith. Ron Smith was in the NFL from 65 through 74, spent 2 seasons with the Rams, and he was kind of Devin Hester before there was Devin Hester. I think he had about 5 kicks returned for touchdown, 2 punts, 3 kickoffs, and he played defensive back, but he was known as a punt and kick returner, and the Rams actually had him for a couple years. In fact, I remember late in 72, early 73, one of the guys in our neighborhood, his name was Gilbert, was kind of lamenting the days when Ron Smith used to be a Ram. On this day in 2001, the Rams hired Lovie Smith as their defensive coordinator, and he was their DC for 3 years before moving on to success and a Super Bowl appearance with the Chicago Bears. And on this day in 2020, and this feels especially poignant, given the state of the Rams special teams, on this day in 2020, John Bones Fossil resigned as special teams coach for the Rams, and he's been with the Cowboys ever since. We mentioned the birthdays of Oshwan Mathis and Ernest Brown today. Sorry, Ernest Brown, for being unemployed. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him back as an offseason signing and stuff, but keep an eye on that. On this day in 2021, at the age of 84, Mike Henry, who most people know as an actor, died. But Mike Henry, who played in a lot of John Wayne movies, he played in the Smokey and the Bandit movies as Jackie Gleason's sidekick or partner or son. Played, he was just always a tough guy. I think he played a little Tarzan on TV. He was a linebacker for the Rams for a couple of years, went to USC, and he passed away at the age of 84. On this day in 2005, Cam Cleland caught a 17-yard touchdown pass from Mark Bulger with 2:11 to play, and the Rams beat the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle 27-20. How's that? Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Same day, a year ago, Rams lost in overtime to Seattle in 1916. Now, I'm going to cover January 9th. January 9th is kind of a significant day. There's a lot of stuff that happened on January 9th because we're not here tomorrow. Tomorrow is January the 9th. So, speaking of crazy owners, Dan Reeves, at the end of the 68 season, fired George Allen. His players all protested. We just talked about this a couple weeks ago. And Dan Reeves was forced to officially rehire George Allen on this day in 1969, and Allen starts the 1969 season going 11-0. And then there was that catastrophe at the end of the year where they lost 4 straight and got bounced in that playoff game in Minnesota. On this date, a real big date in Rams history, Chuck Knox resigned as Rams head coach. It was right after, a few weeks after the Mud Bowl. And again, this was a case of, did Carroll Rosenbloom really know what he wants? We know what Chuck Knox became, and we know what the Rams were with Chuck Knox. And we saw Chuck Knox turn into Marty Schottenheimer. In some ways, he's Sean McDermott right now, and kind of gets you even beyond just ordinary and turns you into extraordinary, but can't just quite go to that next level. But it was a big day when Chuck Knox resigned. George Allen came back in, and the madness began, right? George Allen's fired. Within a year, Carroll Rosenbloom's gone. Georgia takes control. And really, you can kind of pin that whole madness of the Rams beginning, I think, in January of 1978 when Chuck Knox resigned. On this day in 1991, right after the 1990 season, the Rams had gone 5-11. They were coming off the 1989 playoff run, remember? The Flipper Anderson catch, the win in Philly, and then the blowout in Frisco. In 1990, they finished 5-11, and a lot of coaches paid the price, right? They fired Artie Giagantino, longtime assistant with John Robinson. He was an assistant linebackers coach. They fired defensive coordinator Fritz Schirmer. They fired special teams coach Jairo Penaranda out of UCLA, and he was with the Rams in the early 80s. And they fired assistant defensive line coach, a guy named Larry Brooks, right? Now, here's the interesting thing. They fired Fritz Schirmer, and a week later, they hired this young, exciting new defensive coordinator, right? Now, that defensive coordinator is coming to a team that has Kevin Green, who had just had 13 sacks, and since becoming a starter in 88, was always in double-digit sacks. And that new defensive coordinator decided to tinker with things, and Kevin Green went from 13 sacks in 1990 to 3 sacks in 1991. By 1992, he was back on track to his Hall of Fame career. But does anyone know who that exciting young defensive coordinator was? I'll wait till the end of the show. I'll give you time to do that. All right. On this day in Ram history in 2006, unfortunately, Jack Snow passed away at the age of 62. He developed some kind of MRSA when he was in the hospital. Snow had been released by the Rams in 76 after 11 seasons. He pretty much a starter his whole career until Ron Jesse came. He only missed 4 games, played in 150. Someone who knew him when he was at St. Anthony's High School said he told all of his friends when he was in high school that one day he was going to play for the Rams. And he had been a draft pick, a first-round draft pick, 8th overall by the Vikings out of Notre Dame. He caught 340 passes, averaged 17 yards a catch, 45 touchdowns. He only played in 1 Pro Bowl. He only had 1 50-catch season. He caught 51 passes 1 year. But he had a great career. And he was traded to the Rams, drafted 8th overall. And then the Rams, a month later after he was drafted, the Rams sent wide receiver Jim Red Phillips, who was a solid receiver, a really good receiver, and defensive tackle Gary Larson to the Vikings for Jack Snow. Larson ended up playing 10 years for the Vikings. He was a main member of the Purple People Eaters, appeared in some Super Bowls and stuff. And the Rams, Red Phillips played 3 years there. His career faded, but Jack Snow became a star for the Rams. But unfortunately, Jack Snow passed away on this day at the age of 62. Not on this day, on January 9th, tomorrow, at the age of 62. And just for some good news, on this day in 2021, the wild card games for the 2020 season, it was a Saturday. The Rams went up to Seattle again and beat the Seahawks 30-20. Darius Williams, pick 6. Matt Gay, 3 field goals. The legendary Robert Woods, 15-yard touchdown pass from Jared Goff, right? There we go. I think we got it in there. And we will move on. Some questions here that came in. Let's see. I can't see it. Where am I at? Steeler fan Rob. We would have played the Chiefs if Miami would have won. I think you could have hassled the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are ripe to be plucked and stuff. Bill, nice scene with Puka and Mom during the game. Yes, it was. I'm not a heartless soul, Bill. You're right. It was a nice scene, but I just wasn't caught up with it. Geez nuts, man, not that I was more worried before, but we need a kicker that can make a dang extra point attempt at least. Yeah, absolutely. Geez nuts, Kendrick sucks, put Yeast out there. Well, Yeast is a safety. Well, I guess if you don't care because Kendrick's bad, but Kendrick only got hurt once yesterday, just once. You're right. Cut him some slack. Geez nuts. Thoughts on Wentz's performance? I thought overall he did good, but seemed a bit shaky and jittery at first. If it wasn't for him picking up first downs on his feet, we would have been in trouble. But, it was his first game in over a year. I was impressed from the get-go with Wentz. I thought Wentz did a really good job. And maybe that's just the selfish side of me. I wanted to see him play well because I don't want to have to lose hope if Matthew Stafford bangs his thumb on somebody's helmet, right? Expat, Mud Bowl, thanks for the reminder of the darkest days of Rams history after all those mini ice bowls. What was up with the weather that cursed LA? I don't know. You got to wonder if there was some curse on LA, right? There was something going on because that Mud Bowl was, what was so brutal, Expat? If you were living in LA at that time, that game was blacked out. We listened to it with Dick Enberg, who you love, and it was Dick Enberg's last game as the Rams announcer, because then came in Al Wisk and then later Bob Starr, both those guys were solid, but Dick Enberg, right after Vin Scully, man, he's right there. Well, right after Vin Scully and Chick Hearn, right? And don't forget Bob Miller with the Kings. But yeah, that was a hard one, man. That was a real brutal one to take. Okay, I'm going to let you guys go. Oh man, I went much longer than I thought. But hey, does anyone know? Is anyone going to answer the question? In 1990, after the 1990 season, the Rams fired Fritz Schirmer as their DC, and they hired a young, hot defensive coordinator who played for John Robinson at USC. And Kevin Green was starting to establish himself as an All-Pro in 1990. He had 13 sacks, had been in double-digit sacks since 1988. Does anybody know who the Rams hired as DC in 1991? Well, if you're not going to write it, anybody, you're forcing me to say the name. His name was Jeff Fisher. Geez nuts. That's right. It was Jeff Fisher and Kevin Green. He tinkered with Kevin Green, and Green's stats dropped from 13 sacks to 3 sacks. Now, a year later, Green was back into double digits and would be, except the exception of his Steeler year, the year they went to the Super Bowl. He had 9, but he was in double digits for the rest of his career. But isn't that amazing? Just thought I'd throw a little Jeff Fisher at you just to let you guys know how brutal it was, right?
It was a stone groove, yes, my man.
It was a stone groove, and thankfully Jeff Fisher has moved on. But again, if your team's 2-14, he's probably not a bad guy to bring in. All right, guys, are we cool? Everyone's questions answered. Thank you so much for clicking on. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for the encouragement. Geez nuts, expat, Bill, all you guys. You want the battle-worn helmet as a prize in the back. I can't give this away, guys. I can't. This is essential to the Ram Cave. I can't do it. I just can't do it. Sorry about that. Okay, guys. God bless. Take care. Check us out on Spotify. Tell your friends. And let's just have a great week as we get ready for the postseason.